angel of death, hear my prayer. Save us from ourselves. Greetings, chromatic warriors. Today we'll be working on Lord Dante of the Blood Angels. As I like to say, every piece is an experiment, and what this piece offers me is a chance to work on a full figure in true metallic metals, which a lot of figures can do that, but I do appreciate this kind of artificer armor, the sculpted Roman warrior, the kind of faceless, death-dealing, covered in gold. You know, it's very 40K. And it reminds me of when I was young and my oldest brother brought home that first box of Space Marines, RTB01, spray painted one of them entirely gold. My mind was forever changed. So here I am, coming full circle back to Gold Man 40K. True metallic metals can be a little bit difficult to control, so having a larger canvas being his entire body, I could really focus in on, I wanted to create a bit of a spotlighting effect. So first I took a picture of the model, and you can see it, here just in black, and then with a bit of, concentrated globe of light over the model's upper shoulder, so I could, silhouetting the model nicely as everything goes down towards the feet. It becomes very dark, and then picking out that little perch that Dante is positioned on. It gives me this kind of harsh light spotlighting situation to play around with, which is kind of the main emphasis of this video, that and a solid true metallic metal recipe. Also, just compositionally, I wanted to give the model the impression that he's sort of making planetfall. The sculpting that I did around the base in this kind of slightly C-shape gives him this impression that, there's kind of maybe a burst of energy around him, or he's making planet fall and there's all kind of debris being cast up around him. Of course, it's all an illusion, but I wanted to create that impression. I like that feeling when you look at this model, the way it's descending and dealing death. Coming down into very drab surroundings, being very brightly polished itself. Also, I want to keep the palette pretty limited on this model. I like a simple, effective work, and he's so bright and warm, why not make the base dark and cold? So it's kind of some basic temperature play going on. And yeah, just trying to get as many metallics involved as I can, throwing contrast paints over already painted gold metallics. Yeah, that's a little bit of the ideas swirling around in my head before I got into this project. So without any further ado, we can get into a little bit of painting. So, to kick the model off, I'll be starting with 3 solid coats of old gold from Vallejo Model Color. Metallic paints, I always hear, I'll take it as truth, are intended to go over a solid black base coat. The reflective qualities within them, the metallic flakes, interact better with a solid black base coat. Rarely do I follow this rule, but today is different. So, just 3 solid coats through the airbrush, making sure that everything has had a nice chance to dry. Then I took some Deathless Metal from P3 and started mixing things downwards. I had some paint already mixed up in a little cup so it would feed through the airbrush, and I just started gradually adding more Deathless Metal. A 50-50 mixture is a good jumping off point, but what you're really looking for is just a step halfway down in darkness. Sometimes you may have to add a little bit more of your darker tone, but you're just looking for a nice, decent step as you're working your way down. And again, 3 solid coats. Things can be a little deceiving through the airbrush. One coat can look very nice and smooth, but lack the saturation that you need. So I want to make sure that these shadows are equally populated with metallic flakes, so there it goes. Then, once I had all of that dried and applied, I took some Deathless Metal and then just mixed in some Steino Res. Just a black primer, works pretty well, poured right out of the bottle. But now I'm starting to reduce the population of metallic flakes in the paint, and I want a little bit more strength in the shadows. I wanted things to be flat. I don't want those reflective characteristics in the shadows, so a bit of that opaque black mixed in. You can see now how it's kind of accenting that globe of light very nicely, kind of taking a look at the model from a decent distance away. You can see the overall spotlighting and silhouette going on. Very nice. Then, very, very briefly, the airbrush can give you quick results and even faster mistakes. I wanted to reapply that small globe of light, so just spraying a little bit of old gold. Filling up the brush and cleaning it out took more time than applying this coat of paint. It got done very quickly. Then, further still, brightening up that old gold a little bit by mixing in some silver. Even brighter, and yes, 1 or 2 spritzes. I want to make sure that things are saturated, of course, laying down an even amount of coats and everything, but you want to maintain a very tight aim on this area. It's very quick, it's easy to quickly kind of start just giving him a zenithal job, but I want to maintain that very tight bit of light, so just a few quick shots until things are looking brighter in my chosen area, and I'm good. With the airbrushing in place, it was time for a little bit of edge highlighting, a little bit of blending. I'd be using various combinations of old gold and silver, appropriately. Like in the lower areas, I'll limit that to just a pure old gold highlight. In the brightest areas, it will be a pure silver highlight, maintaining that globe of light. A lot of brush work, very quick to describe that step. With this firm foundation of metallics laid in place, it was time to bust out the contrast paints. You could use an ink wash if you want, you can use a regular wash. I think ink or contrast paints, being of a more satin nature, will complement the gold. True metallic metal gold is a gloss paint, so using other glossy colors will help with the flow and finding the crevices and all of that, so they work well together. But in the darker areas, I threw down some wildwood, and in the brighter areas, Agaros dunes. It's a little bit more of a brighter, richer yellow tone, so a bit of a wet blend with 2 contrast paints. You can be pretty sloppy on this part. It's just washes. I also picked out the pauldrons with some Blood Angel's red and the wreath around his head with some orc, orc flesh? Yeah. There's also a small reflection on the back of his shoulder pad where it meets up with his jump pack. Maybe later on I think I ended up coating his pistol as well in the red, some other, just pulling a little more red metallic in there because it looked cool. Alright, now we're cooking with gas. All of the metallics are laid in place. It's time to chop the model up. I want to apply some base coats and just get a better look at the overall composition. It's easier on the eyes this way. Now I'm throwing some colors onto my wet palette as well, which they'll come in handy later. So I'm going to be base coating all of the greaves and any other areas that I want to read as black or gray. They'll get a base coat of German gray from Vallejo model color. All of the reds, I'll lay down a coat of sanguine base from P3 on those. Mainly the loincloth is kind of the big red feature, but he has some small gemstones as well. The purity seals were given a base coat of black brown and green brown. Both of those colors are from Vallejo model color. And the axe was given a base coat of black mixed with dark Prussian blue. Later on, I want to bring up some lightning effects on this that will graduate to the turquoise arcane blue area, so starting it with kind of a blued out black, well, that's good method. I also have some other metallic areas to be pulling out. I'll use gunmetal gray, just a nice deep silver from Vallejo. Deathless metal will come into play again. I've got the barrel of the the flame pistol or whatever, his gun. I shouldn't have gotten so specific. Paint the barrel of the gun. I like admiring the model at this state. I can see where things are going. It's a little bit motivating. I can see a glimpse at the light at the end of the tunnel. And all I need to do now is fully render everything and fill in all those boring details that aren't gold armor. Briefly, because I want to keep this video focused on Dante, I suppose the base is part of the adventure, but I don't want to go into great depth. I've done plenty of videos on, we know how to dry brush, wet blend, smash colors around, but as you can see, I'm painting along on this wreckage. I'm using a mixture of black brown, dark Prussian blue, and guncore brown, all mixed together for the dirt. A little bit of deck tan, some blue gray thrown into place. I brought some German uniform green into the wreckage, mixed with like black and dark Prussian blue. I lost interest in this part. Honestly, again, it's not the feature. I just want, and it's supposed to be all murky and shitty looking, so just make it cold and cruddy. Throw a little weathering powder in for fun. I pulled out some strong tone and blue tone from Army Painter and mixed them together thinking, okay, I have brown dirt, I have cold shadows, blue, brown, perfect. I made green. It's fine, it's still a nice cold dirty green, but that is what happened and I'm fine with this happy little accident. Now it's time to apply some general highlights. I have a lot of different materials and textures that I can pull into play. For example, the greaves. Those can be reminiscent of more of a semi-satin rubber tubing, so I can apply a little bit more of a spectral highlight, making them a lot more drastic in their depth and just highlighting them up with some deck tan, washing them down with some Nuln oil, but being a little mindful and deliberate as to where I'm placing those highlights so it appears to be kind of a rubbery material. I raised up the purity seals following that, just taking that original base coat color of green brown and black brown, mixing in buff, also from Vallejo. It's a nice kind of yellowed out ivory tone. I kind of raise things into the parchment zone, and then I threw a wash of Agrax Earthshade over that, just kind of unifying, browning, and darkening everything. Then pulled back up a Vallejo, Vallejo buff. I always have a habit of saying Vallejo buff every time, but that's probably just good information. But taking the color buff, mixing a little bit of white into it to spike it up, and mamma mia, your purity seals are done. Again, mindful placement of the highlights. You can see how a lot of these materials I'm getting onto, less is more. We have this global highlight, right? This little glowing highlight over the model's shoulder, so that you can't have everything else just being rendered in a different light form. So again, just very, very minuscule usage of those brighter colors because you don't want to pull away from that brightest area. Oh, then it was time for the many, many gems. I was hunting all over his golden body trying to dig up little treasures. Yes, so Khador red base, Khador red highlight, a little bit of white, and black from Vallejo. Those are the colors at play. I think we're all somewhat familiar with gem progressions. I did do a video called Gem College on this Patreon that you can see how I paint gems. But yeah, just a delicate mixture, taking that black and red into each other, placing the shadow up high so it appears the light is falling through, the gem is semi-transparent, graduating up to a pure Khador red, pulling then a little bit of that bright orange in the form of Khador red highlight into that mixture. But now when I have this hot red, then I started pulling white into that hot red. I didn't go full orange and pull white in, you know what I mean? So I'm kind of coming up to like a salmon tone. I had a black line around the base of all the gems. It just, the way they were seated in the housings, later we'll get into some black lining later, but just at this point in the process during this step, I was like, yep, every one of these I do while my focus is here, I'll line around them. And then best I could, I placed 2 small reflective dots of light, because one would not be good enough. So I placed one slightly larger dot and then a secondary moon dot, rotating around the larger dot, you see. Makes for a shiny gem. Then it was time for some of those final red highlights on the handle of the weapon, the loincloth. Same progression as the gems before, the same colors at play, but by applying different amounts, different mixtures, I can create a more deeply reading red tone. I didn't want the handle or the loincloth really to match the same vibrance as the gemstones, right? So just leaving a little bit off the table, smaller highlight portions and a little bit of more of a black mixed into that sanguine base. When I originally had base coated it with sanguine base, mixing a little bit more black into there so it came off as more of a deep burgundy instead of the polished gemstones. So even with the color red and the same colors in place, through mixtures you can create a small subtle difference. And now it was time for the electric meat slicer. That's right, the Power Axe. It was base coated in dark Prussian blue and black originally. Then I started to mix in arcane blue from P3. This is just a bright turquoise. You can see I'm starting with wider lightning bolts, Very, very dark, you know, fat, kind of subtly there, lightning bolts, and then pulling in very tight progressions where he gets to like a pure vein of that arcane blue. And yeah, I really like played around with this a lot. It was a balancing act, kind of going back and forth between like the brightest color and the previous color, because I needed to make sure that these lightning bolts were just absolutely sharp, and you know, those tiny glowing bits, that mixture of white and arcane blue for the final dots of highlight, you know, I wanted those to really stick out. So surrounded by a lot of dark and mid-tone and just very sharp jumps. It's okay if the axe is bright. It's generating its own kind of situation. It exists by itself too. I didn't use any turquoise in the rest of the model, but I think it does accompany that colder blue base, creating a little bit of color communication. You see the axe, you see the cold base, pulls you across that hot body, your eyes start moving around the hot body, and you're doing a gem hunt. Now my gold man is ready to dance. He will roll nothing but sixes, even on D20s. It's time for a final round of black lining, those silver highlights, those old gold highlights. Just give it a look, make it look nice. Yeah, just the subtle placement, the tiny dots and slashes to really polish something off. I'm diluting paints here and there. I might do just a little bit of a blend with these metallics, but yeah, I just kind of sat back and took some time to really sharpen and polish, especially the black lining though. I've already done these silver highlights and stuff previously, but the black lining really makes things pop out, as you can see it happening here. Yeah, I think it's essential, even on some of these armor panels that are just gold bordering gold. Really makes things pop, having that sharpness and the blackness. Things were looking a little drab on the base, which was my intention, so I guess things went according to plan, but I did not enjoy said plan. So I brought in a little bit more light sienna weathering powder and just kind of dusted into the mids. I have some chosen mounds for Dante. And there he is. This was a 10-hour day for me. I was not holding a brush the entire time, but I was engaged in thinking about Dante all 10 hours, and the experiment was really to see if I can fit all this 4K footage on my computer and upload a longer, more detailed tutorial, the kind of all-in-one complete process. A lot of tests going on before I get into something even more time-consuming and even more intense. So I hope you enjoyed this rundown of Dante and the observation of theory. The word bucket. Sometimes you reach in and you accidentally pick one that doesn't... It makes sense, but it's not the one that you wanted to fit. But yeah, I'm trying to include more theory in this video, but just doing a little bit briefer version of what I want to do to test myself. So please let me know what you think about this tutorial in the comment section down below. It's been a lot of fun. This model is a gift. I'm going to give it to a friend who's a big fan of Blood Angels, who is a very early supporter of mine and commissioned me to paint a lot of Blood Angels. So every time one of these characters passes across my desk, Mr. Barry, this one's for you, and you probably will not see this video. But it would be nice to give a gift and have it be appreciated. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this gift. Have a good day, find some time to hobby, remain unchained.